Audience, it is the 30th of July in 2024, and the days are ticking down to Election Day. And I'm Kevin Hoare, and I'm here tonight with a very special guest that it's been a little while since you've been on, actually,
It has.
Jeff, and it seems like multiple political lifetimes ago. But some of the same issues are still swirling around, and you like to write about them on Oregon Roundup, which is oregonroundup.substack.com. You also have a podcast that you do, which touches upon these topics as well. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. I think pretty much every week for the last month or two has been a lifetime in politics already.
Yeah.
It's things are moving so fast. So great to catch up. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and of course, you're the former mayor of Bend. You dabble in investigative journalism, of course, with what you're doing, and have even taken a role at times at getting in there and challenging some of the things that are going on. So hats off to you, because you've kind of become the quasi-expert on several things, one of which, of course, caught my attention because I've been working with Monique Despain's congressional campaign is the one person meltdown of corruption that is Val Hoyle, and her connections with LaMotta, which, as we know, are now under investigation by the Department of Justice, and then, of course, how all these things are sort of connected with the same people doing the same corrupt stuff, like with FTX and the Democrat Party of Oregon, and the way they've whitewashed that. And you've talked about that pretty extensively. I think the last article that you had, there were a couple of articles you had about Val Hoyle since you were last on. One is just that she's bad at her job. And another was that the co-founders of LaMotta finally came forward, and it was confirmed by the FEC that they gave Val Hoyle money orders, which apparently is somehow splitting the difference between writing a check and giving cash, is the untraceable old money order. Why don't we talk about those two things? That the update, of course, is on the money orders, and I was curious if you share with us what that was about.
Yeah. So last summer, when everything was breaking about LaMotta making cash contributions to Oregon politicians, which was a phenomenon that was reported by the Oregonian and Willamette Week pretty extensively. And they, the last so I looked at the FEC reports for Val Hoyle, the Federal Election Commission reports, the fundraising reporting that all campaigns have to do. And I saw that they had given back in April of 22, when Hoyle was still running in the primary for the 4th District, a bunch of different donations in relatively small amounts on the same day. And so, totaling $5,800 between the two of them, which at the time was the maximum. So taking those two facts, I thought, okay, well, can federal candidates accept more than $100 in cash? My assumption being, or my hypothesis, that that these were cash donations, because why else would they be broken down into those smaller dollar figures? I kind of had assumed that she might have been, or they might have been, taking cash from their various outlets and bringing them in separately to make the donations. But anyway, so I found out that there's a $100 limit on the amount of cash contributions that federal candidates can retain, and so I filed an FEC complaint saying, hey, it looks like Hoyle retained these donations in excess of the federal maximum, and that's a violation. So they just got back to me like a year after I filed the thing, and the FEC said that they're not going to take it any further. They did get state on account of them not having the resources, so they have to prioritize certain cases and not others. The FEC is a 3 Republican, 3 Democrat appointed board, and they so it's split. So they kind of need at least one person of the other party to go along with anything that a party wants to do. Anyway, they said we're not pursuing it, but they did get statements from Hoyle and from the LaMotta folks, and they all said in their sworn statements that they made the contributions in money orders, and they produced copies of the money orders, and they were made on that date. And so that the interesting thing about that is they're in money orders, and which is I've worked a lot in campaigns. I don't think I've ever seen anyone make a campaign contribution in money orders.
Me neither. No.
But it has been reported in the past that Aaron Mitchell, one of the LaMotta folks, was on the record in some court proceeding saying he doesn't have bank accounts. So that I guess that would be one reason why one would use money orders. Anyway. The other interesting thing about that I found out because of the FEC response was that that it was clear that Hoyle's attorney and LaMotta's attorney were sharing documents prior to responding to the FEC. I filed my complaint back in August of 2023. By then it was, we'd gone through the thing where LaMotta becomes completely toxic, even to Democrats and the media.
Which that was like April, right? When Shania Fagan.
Yeah. So they were a no-go, Democrat candidates and office holders, including Tina Kotek, were giving money, saying that they're giving the money that LaMotta had given them to charity because they didn't want to be tainted by LaMotta. But here we have Congresswoman Val Hoyle's attorney collaborating on a response to a federal election complaint with LaMotta's attorney. Seems like kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's that story. That's kind of the update on Hoyle. An interesting aside that's not related to Hoyle. Around that same time in 23, I filed a FEC complaint against Ron Wyden. You mentioned the FTX stuff.
Yep.
Actually, I filed that one like a week or two before I filed the Hoyle complaint, and I haven't heard back on the Wyden complaint yet. So I don't know if that means they're taking a closer look at it, or if maybe the parties were slower responding. But it's interesting that one is still hanging out there.
It seems like they also probably are trying to buy as much time as possible for the whole election to take place, because Wyden's not on the ballot this year, right?
No.
So so they're kind of hoping that this one just blows over at some point. And I think that Wyden. Why don't you hit on the essence of what that complaint was about?
Yeah. So back in October of 22, a guy named Nishad Singh gave, in a complicated way, gave $500,000 to the Democratic Party of Oregon. This was when Christine Drazan was polling ahead of Tina Kotek. You might remember that. A month out from the election. And the Dems were desperate at that point because there were literally national stories being written about how Oregon might go red in 2022, and it was considered a real possibility right at that time. So this guy Nishad Singh gives $500,000 to the Democratic Party of Oregon. Democratic Party of Oregon misreports the source of the donation, telling the Secretary of State that it was actually a contribution from this outfit named Prime Trust, which is, as far as I can tell, basically a bank for cryptocurrency. So basically, it's like if I wrote you a check, Kevin, signed it Jeff Eager, and I bank at U.S. Bank, and you entered you told the Secretary of State that it was a contribution from U.S. Bank, not Jeff Eager. So it's that kind of mistake which they'd made previously in another Democratic race in the spring, but that's getting off topic. Anyway, the Secretary of State's office looked into the misreporting because that's illegal under Oregon law, and determined that it was they fined them a little bit of money. Anyway, it turned out once I started looking into this story that Nishad Singh was the chief engineer of a cryptocurrency company named FTX. FTX is in never-ending bankruptcy right now, and its founder Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted on fraud charges and is serving decades in federal prison right now, in part for fraud related to campaign contributions. And what the evidence showed in that case is that FTX and Bankman-Fried would use surrogates like, and including specifically Nishad Singh, to give contributions to campaigns in Singh's name rather than in FTX's name. Well, FTX couldn't make direct contributions in federal races. They could have in Oregon, actually.
But they were essentially straw contributions to this guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So they would use him as the straw contributor. It turns out that Ron Wyden, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, his longtime fundraising consultant was in the middle of that transaction of the donation from Singh to the Democratic Party of Oregon. There was this fundraiser was copying people on her emails about this, and copying people in Wyden's campaign office with their campaign email addresses, etc. Anyway, there's a limit under federal law. I think it's like $25,000 to the amount that a member of Congress can help direct to a state PAC. It is less than the $500,000 that was contributed.
Yeah.
But my complaint is that Ron Wyden violated that law by facilitating the $500,000 contribution.
And it was his staff that was handling it all, or a consultant, rather, close to his.
It was a consultant who's worked for him for forever, and this consultant was introduced by FTX's government affairs person to someone else as all things Ron Wyden. So she was in that transaction, at least according to this person who worked for FTX, as representing or affiliated with Ron Wyden. And so that's what happened.
And of course, it took a really long time for the Democrat Party of Oregon to take, because once this reached federal court, they had stolen this money from customers of FTX, right? So that's what the whole case is about there. And so essentially the DPO wasn't just getting an illegally reported contribution. They were getting money that was stolen from customers of the company and then donated as a straw donation to the Democratic Party of Oregon. And the exact timing where it was actually not possible to easily find out who the real donor was before the election was over. So they actually, it's too clever by half to have all these things fall into place and for these to be some sort of mistake, accident, clerical error. By the way, I seem to remember that business record reporting errors could turn into felonies and land you a real, even if you didn't do it yourself, if somebody was doing it and you just happened to be in charge of some entity that was somehow connected to it, that you could maybe face some serious jail time.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that's a hot crime to charge these days.
So in this one, they gave $500,000. It was very timely because it was used to run all the massive operations that they needed in order to assist a candidate who was below the Republican in the polls. And that's Tina Kotek, now governor of Oregon.
Yep.
Not to mention other candidate campaigns who benefited from this directly and indirectly, such as, I don't know, Val Hoyle, perhaps,
Yep.
because the parties do get out the vote operations and all kinds of other things for these candidates. And once that money is being done by the party, then the candidates don't actually have to expend their resources for those things. So
Yep.
it's all fungible, right?
Yep.
And that's what happened, and it worked. They won these races that were close.
They won these races that were close. You mentioned the illegal, or the fact that the money was stolen from FTX clients. That's true. And the DPO handed the $500,000 over to U.S. Marshals to pay it back into, I think, the bankruptcy estate of FTX, so that some of that money gets back to creditors of FTX. But yeah, DPO just forked the money over because it was clearly money illegally obtained by whoever gave it to the DPO.
So they couldn't keep it, but it took them. Let's see, when was this? It took them nearly a year, didn't it?
Yes.
To scrounge together the $500,000, gift from the sky that they got in 2022 in order to refund it to the estate of FTX so that it could then be dealt with in this federal court proceeding. And that just shows that it was a loan. It's a loan that they had to pay no interest on, that came into the exact right moment to help them win several elections, including a really big one for governor. And the penalty that they paid for it was a slap on the wrist. It was like, what, $15,000?
$15,000 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, to the Secretary of State. And this decision was made by a person who used to be in a role that I was in, but with the Democrat Party of Oregon. She was the communications director for the Democrat Party of Oregon. She moved over, got the job of overseeing this case at the Secretary of State's office. And then when someone else apparently just quit because they needed to go spend more time with their family, so Molly Woon got the job instead. And lo and behold, they took what was going to be a $30,000 fine and lowered it to $15,000. That's all it cost them. A $500,000 timely loan that it took a year to repay with no interest, and the only cost of the transaction was $15,000. That sounds like a bargain. We should all do that. That's the way. If that's how politics is going to work in the state of Oregon, then so be it. Because I'll bet we could really get some great loans for the state Republican Party too.
You're getting me worked up, Kevin, because this story, more than anything else I think I've done, it just boils my blood that it hasn't gotten more exposure than what it has. The Oregonian did, to its credit, run a story about Wyden's consultant being in the middle of the transaction, and that was good. But they were the only media outside of, if to the degree I'm media, that reported on it, and it is a big story with a lot of different weird stuff in it. A U.S. senator, a bankrupt and fraudulent company, a straw donor, or putatively straw donor. Singh admitted to being a straw donor in other cases. Just no one cared to ask him about Oregon. and now, which brings me to where we are right now with that story, is that the Department of Justice just announced in the last couple of weeks that they were not pursuing any criminal charges against anyone related to any of that stuff that we just talked about for violation of Oregon law. So they said that we're not going to prosecute the DPO. because they innocently made a mistake, even though it was the same mistake. I mean, to DOJ's credit, they did ask DPO, hey, did you happen to know about this time that an Oregon Democratic primary, like 6 months ago, there was a false and admittedly false contribution attributed to Prime Trust that came from the FTX world as well? Like, it was exactly the same fact pattern. And it had happened in the congressional primary earlier that year. DOJ includes that in their little letter saying that they're not going to prosecute. That some of the DPO people did admit they knew about that prior case, but they said, DOJ said, nonetheless, we don't think we can work up evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they did. Oregon is not going to prosecute Singh, who pled guilty to federal charges of doing exactly what we think he did here. But no one's cared because this is these are Oregon campaigns. And so the feds don't care about it necessarily. And so the only people that can enforce Oregon campaign law is the state of Oregon, and the state of Oregon just said, no, we're not going to, not even against Singh, who probably would admit to it if you put the pressure on him, because he admitted to doing the same in the feds. But this is, it's just each new thing that happens about this, it just blows my mind, to be honest.
Well, I hope this becomes an issue actually in the Attorney General's race, because frankly, the cover-up continues for sure if Dan Rayfield emerges victorious. But there's a real opportunity to enforce the law and end the lawlessness and the lies and the fraud at the highest level of electoral politics in Oregon, simply by going and you don't ask somebody also, by the way, whether something was to their knowledge the case or not. You actually go and subpoena all the evidence,
right? And
you assemble what turns into a perjury trap for them if they decide to lie. And then when they admit to it, you say, well, we're going to charge you, and you can now plead, right? Or you don't admit to it and you say, I'm taking the fifth. But it's all of this corruption in a cardigan, as I like to call it, where everybody just has a nice time, and it's like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and everybody's fine, and they all move on. We all did our best, but oops, some people did some things that weren't right, and we just won't do that again. We swear.
We'll get to the bottom of it, and then there's never any gotten to the bottom of.
No,
it's remarkable.
Bottomless controversies.
Yep.
And well, so that one's going to labor on. We'll see what happens, because the Fed, I think the Democrats are seriously concerned about what happens if they don't control the Department of Justice at the federal level here in the near future. And if they don't manage to hold on to the Attorney General's office, then all of this stuff starts to melt down for them. Mm-hmm. And it should melt down. They deserve it. They stole 4 years of a governorship with it.
No, I mean, I think that electing Will Lathrop AG would be a huge improvement. I mean, just on this stuff alone, and it shouldn't be a partisan thing. Like, I mean, AG's always been a partisan position, but I've talked to a lot of people kind of in the prosecutorial world about this, and the degree to which the AG's office has been politicized under Rosenblum is completely unprecedented. And that is a key part of why nothing gets done when there are problems that are, criminal or quasi-criminal. We don't have an AG's office who cares to get after that stuff. So there's literally no downside to screwing up when you work for the state of Oregon.
Crime pays. It's free.
Crime
And
pays or incompetence pays, both, both.
gross
And
incompetence, right,
yeah,
mixed with fraud, and then make it so that no one can tell which one's which, like in a chocolate swirl shake. And then, they win elections, they move on, they write the rules, they make sure nothing can get enforced. This is the kind of corruption that would make a New Jersey mobster
yes,
blush, right?
yes, yes. Yeah, I have a reader of mine who emails me sometimes and comments, and he's from Louisiana, and he, I guess he and his wife are in a running debate about which place is more corrupt. And this guy is insistent that Oregon is more corrupt than Louisiana,
Yeah.
which is right up there with
Old Huey Long and all those days.
New
Yeah.
Jersey.
Yeah.
And it's just so frustrating to me, Kevin, because I'm sure it is to you and probably most everyone listening to this, that it should hurt the Democrats, right? So the Democrats, they're the party that want to have government do more stuff. They claim that government is capable of doing tremendous things to shape people's and communities' lives. But especially in Oregon, and not all Democrat-run states are this bad.
Right.
A lot of them are a lot better. Like we're probably the worst, us or California. And there's just no. Why do they want to screw up government so bad? I mean, it's almost like what they want is the process and the money and just the power to do what they want. And then who cares about the results? Who cares?
Yeah, well, and this is what's interesting coming back to Val Hoyle here. She does stuff like this, and I don't even think she thinks twice about it. So here's the other thing I came across just the other day, today. I was looking through some old postings in Willamette Week, Sophie Peel's feed.
Yep.
And I was looking for some old article, and I came across, that pink building in North Bend, LaMotta building. And there's a whole story to this. Yeah. There's a whole story to it. By the way, in the 4th District, because I've been all over it now, every major town in the 4th District has one significant LaMotta building. It's like it is as prevalent as a Fred Meyer, perhaps more so, because some of those towns are too small to have a Fred Meyer, but they've got a LaMotta in a prominent location right downtown. And they wanted to get this LaMotta building in North Bend, which you can see. Everybody knows what building this is because it's right up on top of like a hill in the middle of the main road when you drive through North Bend. And they wanted a permit for a cannabis facility, but it was 49 feet too close to another place. And it had to be like 1,000 feet. And they were like, 961 feet away. So the mayor there, who is a Democrat, by the way, the mayor said, well, the law says that and the ordinance says that, and we're going to stick with that. So this is how arrogant Cazares and what's his name, the LaMotta,
Aaron Mitchell.
Yeah. Aaron Mitchell are. They own this building, and in order to, they wanted to send a message to the mayor because what I found was just a little account here. Here's what it said. Engelke, the mayor, received emails from the city manager who had met with Cazares, the city manager of North Bend. And Cazares wrote an email that, quote, Val, unquote, had shared the mayor's contact information with her. Engelke told Willamette Week that the former Oregon Labor Commissioner and now U.S. Congresswoman Val Hoyle called her earlier that day and asked if she would give the mayor's contact information to Cazares. She said, we would like to see an exception to this rule made for our building, Cazares wrote. We know how important it is to cities like North Bend to support minority and independently owned businesses working to bring jobs and revenue to the city. Such a boon for the economy. I know, but this is a classic example. Val Hoyle doesn't know how wrong this is, how unethical this
No,
is, and
no.
how bad this is going to look later, because she didn't think twice about it. Now, try to get her to help with a real problem in the fourth district. You will not hear anything. You'll get a form letter back. You could say, my wife is dying of cancer and we can't get any treatment, and we want to see if you could help us, get into this facility where there's federal dollars. You could have all those. Nothing. Form letter, right? We know of veterans that have experienced this, and there's a special role that members of Congress have with the VA, which is in Roseburg, as well as other locations, satellite locations. But she dropped everything to help the Lamotta people. And so when they couldn't get this, they turned around and they painted the building pink and declared that they were opening an adult sex toy store called, they gave it a name, I forget, to mock the mayor. And they painted it pink so that it would be an eyesore that everyone would notice. And they named it, the business and the building, after the mayor. And I'm trying to find what the mayor's name. Oh, Jessica ENCORE. They called it Jessica's Adult Entertainment because none of them had any Jessica amongst them. So and this was as a protest to send a message to the North Bend mayor how unhappy they were that they couldn't get a can. So they decided to turn it into an eyesore and tick off everybody. And by the way, the Aaron Mitchell, by the time they unloaded this building and sold it, which is it was sometime in March of 2024, he stuck the city of North Bend with a $7,162 property tax bill, which is so classic because these guys owe tax money, and they're in arrears to the state, to the feds, to the tune of millions.
Yeah.
And it was, by the way, everybody knew that they owed this money, and yet they were happy to receive donations, and Val was happy to make calls to help them out.
I think that it goes to why I think that Val Hoyle's bad at her job, because this kind of thing is, members of Congress get requests like this, right? So people don't necessarily understand the difference between the federal government, state government, local government, and someone knows someone else, and they call their buddy, the congressman from whatever district, and say, hey, can you call the mayor, blah, 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 blah. That's something that does, those requests get made, and sometimes they get fulfilled depending on who the asker is, and what the request is too. But this one, having Hoyle actually do it and get caught doing it is like, there are ways that members of Congress make these things happen.
They work through staffers or intermediaries. And Val's just like, you know what? In your face, I'm doing it myself. Go do this for this person.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, quick. Exactly. I'm a working woman. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to delegate it to my staff. They're probably unionized. I'm sure they are unionized.
Yeah. Oh, probably. Yeah. Well, but it's so yeah, you wrote this article because she is really, but she makes it clear no matter what, on a constant basis, that she loves the cannabis industry and she wants to do anything she can for them. There's dozens of industries that are being, wrecked by regulations from the federal level. There's the entire coastline that hates these offshore wind farms that they're forcing in there.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I'm going to get you get more feedback. And then, let's see what happens because we got a lot of interest to consider. But when it comes to helping in cannabis, it's like she is, all
Johnny
over.
on the spot. Yep.
Yeah. And then I remember on August, you wrote this actually right after she did the 420 video, Happy 420, with Earl Blumenauer, which must be the district Val thinks she's actually in, which is the plus
She
D
acts
plus
like it. Yeah.
22 third district that Earl Blumenauer is in, talking about how wonderful it is that they're fighting back on the failed war on drugs, even though cannabis is legal in the state of Oregon. So what is she fighting back against? Tone deaf in a state overwhelmed with the highest rates of meth and fentanyl addiction in the nation, and the
Yeah.
lowest amount of.
I mean, I think, to me, and I have no polling to back this up. This is merely the vibes that I detect. I think Oregon's pulled back. I think it's hit its high point for like pro drug or drug legalization stuff. I think that
they're done.
I think that people have pulled back from a lot of that, and I think there has been some national polling that shows that favorability of marijuana has kind of gone down with kind of all the drug issues, harder drug issues that we have. So it seems like kind of not the direction the electorate's going. Now, granted, her district does include Eugene, so it's hard to say. But
you must think that's the whole district, actually, which I've heard described as 50 square miles surrounded by reality. Eugene. So probably heard that too.
Yep. But yeah, it's just she's just not good at her job,
and kind of tone deaf about all the people suffering with the addiction, and tone deaf about an open border that she thinks we actually need the flow through the border. She went and did a press conference and we need this flow through the border, and not and in El Paso, Texas, and not but 6 weeks later, that same border location she visited, military age males overwhelmed and pummeled Texas National Guard troops who were preventing them from.
Was she at Eagle Pass right before that?
It was at El Paso. It was
okay.
El Paso. And so the same El Paso location where she went to go visit and said, well, we need to have dignity, and we gotta have the Dignity Act, and which is to enshrine in law what's happening now, but just make it legal.
Yeah.
And she said, we need this flow through the border. We need the workforce, and this is how we're going to get it. And nothing about human smuggling, nothing about all the fentanyl and meth that's absolutely coming through that border.
Yep.
Nothing about the gang members that waltz in, waltz out, waltz back into the country and commit all these heinous crimes. And now we know hundreds of terrorists. Right?
Yeah, that's the best part. Yep.
So, she's kind of really good at saying the one thing that either doesn't age well or even doesn't seem to fit with what's happening now.
Yeah.
She doesn't get it.
Well, you see how hard the Dems are trying to tack back to the center on immigration generally.
Yeah.
And so again, she does seem kind of out of step with that. Like if you think about how hard the Dems are trying to distance Kamala from the border czar title, like they're bending over backwards to try to distance her from that, because
they're trying to stick it down a memory hole.
Yeah, exactly. Because they know that they're way, 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 way out of step with where a lot of their own voters are on that issue. And it'll be interesting if Hoyle changes her tune, or if she just sticks with the old Democrat approach.
Yeah, I think today, actually, it was just today that Val Hoyle got into Fox News, and I don't know if you've seen this yet, but she was pursued by somebody asking her a question, and the question that she was being asked was, which she declined to answer, which is, what do you think of the job that border czar Kamala Harris has been doing? And because after Kamala Harris is, obviously was assigned that duty by Joe Biden, and it's 100%. Like, you can go and you can actually read the article in the Associated Press, which hasn't been scrubbed yet. I'm going to post that here because I think people need to have that handy when they're challenged with this. But she said that she doesn't, that Kamala Harris she was asked, was Kamala Harris a good border czar? And she said she was not the border czar. Donald Trump stopped legislation from going blah, blah, blah. And then she drifted off and walked away. This whole talking point that they're actually going to blame Donald Trump for the border after what they did for 3.5 years. And after she said, we need this flow through the border, they actually think they have enough control, mind control over voters. They can just make them like forget all of this.
I guess so. I mean, I guess so. Or I really think that there's a high likelihood that Hoyle is just like they're telling her, do this, do that, or other people are doing that in her type of situation, and in what is now a swing seat, officially and for sure a swing seat, that she ought to be tacking toward the center on all this stuff and stop talking about pot. But she keeps doing it.
She loves it and she can't help it. And I just posted the article that said that identified this as a swing seat because the Democrats admitted she was in trouble and stuck them on their front line list of, special needs cases as far as candidates. And then the National Republican Congressional Committee just put her opponent Monique DeSpina on the Young Guns list. So it's becoming clear. And so finally, maybe they're screwing up bad enough that someone really just stupid who's also a poor fundraiser is going to be one of the big news stories here of 2024. There's some big news stories that have gone down in the last month that I thought we might wrap up here with, because you wrote a story about political violence in reaction to what happened with President Trump in Pennsylvania, and an ear width from catastrophe, which actually, if you thought it was bad that he got shot in the ear, and that was right before the Republican National Convention, just think of the aftermath if it actually had resulted in him being severely injured or killed. And then it only took a couple of weeks for Joe Biden. It only took 8 days for Joe Biden's candidacy to melt down completely, and for him to step back, and for us to, and then it took 48 hours for apparently some process that Chuck Schumer described had been followed for Kamala to secure the nomination and for everybody to jump in and endorse her. But then you wrote an article here on the 20th of July saying Biden cannot remain president. He is incapable of performing the harrowing duties of a president during a crisis, because it's actually not as challenging to run for office as it is to make the life and death decisions that a president must make. Why don't you share some of your thoughts on this, everything that went down, the attempted assassination, the Biden, denomination, and the Kamala coronation?
It's got to be the most dramatic. All of that's happened in the month, I think, ish. The most dramatic political month in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure. In terms of just the large, the size of the issues and the rapidity with which they occurred was really remarkable. I mean, if you had any one of these things happening, a president getting nearly assassinated, a former president, candidate for president, getting nearly assassinated, would be a historic event in and of itself.
Yeah,
that's one of those things, one of these near misses that happen to presidents, it seems, fortunately, rather than them getting actually killed.
Yeah.
It's that in and of itself would be a historic event. But now you have a clearly incapacitated president, and the world, his party and the media coming to the realization suddenly that that couldn't be hidden anymore, and then um, and then have kind of that weird couple weeks when the press was actually covering Joe Biden, like critically covering Joe Biden, which was such a weird thing to witness, and drove him out of the race, along with Obama and some of the rest of
Oh
them.
yeah.
I mean, and then having Harris, who everyone a month ago, 2 weeks ago would have said, no way, like the Dems can't run her. Like even when, Joe Biden is having his staff shield him as he's walking out to Marine One because his walk looks so bad. Like that's just really a unique sequence of events. And I think it means that, who knows? I mean, this election now there's been so much input from the exterior of the campaign, like kind of external to what Trump has been doing or what Biden and now Harris is doing. That I think it just jumbles things a little bit. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that we're closely split, highly partisan electorate right now. But it's certainly, the electorate's seen a lot recently.
Well, the issues have stayed the same. And I know a lot of people said, well, then you got to stay on the issues. But admittedly, Kamala Harris herself is an issue, because I honestly don't understand when she's not scripted what she's saying. I don't understand any of it. And it's like talking, it's like gazing into a hall of mirrors. When she answers a question, it's almost like like she is, like, you'd have to for it to make sense, you'd have to be on some sort of hallucinogenic drug.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, I get her now, because there's nothing she says that actually has rhyme or reason to it. I can't even infer it. I can understand when there's something being said that I don't like, perhaps, that's being said by a political opponent, but there isn't enough there for me to even dislike what she's saying, other than the fact that I don't understand it. And then everything she touches has been a disaster. The border, they sent her to Poland to make a speech about how Russia was deterred right before Ukraine was invaded. And I saw yesterday, I saw an article that talked about how no one person is probably singularly more responsible for inflation in the United States than Kamala Harris, because she was the tie-breaking vote in 2021 and 2022 for all of the spending packages they passed, fueled inflation, when we had a 50-50 Senate and she had to jump in there and cast the tie-breaking vote. So she is responsible directly, because usually a vice president can say, all I did is go to funerals. Don't blame me.
Yeah.
But actually she voted and created the circumstances that now she's going to have to run on, that people hate.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. She inherits the Biden issues and all the policy reasons why Biden was as unpopular as he was or is. And she brings with her an extra dose of radicalism that the old man never had.
She can't run as a moderate the way he did, Scranton Joe and working man Joe.
Nope.
And that illusion doesn't even exist for her. She's a San Francisco progressive leftist. She was rated more liberal than Bernie Sanders before she ran for president, or when she was running for president in 2020. She's a glaring hypocrite for putting people in jail for marijuana possession but smoking it herself. And then at the same time, she was the one who supported bailout funds for the people that were burning down Minneapolis and other cities in the country. in the George Floyd riots. Every few hours, a new thing comes out that reminds people of some position she took. I think she said she thought that we should force people to eat less meat. I know in a few more hours there will be another one. So it feels like there's an opportunity here. But then in this world where, the FTXs of the world and the Democrat parties of Oregon don't get prosecuted and no one gets held accountable for stealing elections, I can't tell somebody that they aren't going to pull some sort of fast and loose tricks to get her through.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there was any doubt that the national political media as a whole, their primary focus, other than they all want to make money, blah, 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 but their primary focus secondary to that is making sure the Democrats beat Donald Trump. That is their animating principle. And it was demonstrated very in a really ugly way, I think, over the last month, where it went from them pretending nothing was wrong with Joe Biden, in spite of the images we all saw over their airwaves. They pretended that it was a nothing burger and said that people who said otherwise were ageist and cruel.
Oh, it's got to be one of the biggest political cover-ups of all time.
But then to flip from that to after the debate, and they realized, oh, no one can defend this, basically. And the Dems were then, at that point, they got Dems saying, yeah, no, that's not okay. He's got to go. Then they finally flipped dramatically 180 degrees, and they were super critical of him for a couple weeks. And because they wanted him out of the race because they were worried he was going to lose.
Yeah, and that's the only reason why they want out. Because if he was going to win, he could be a complete vegetable, and they wouldn't care.
It's just, and now they're of course rallying immediately behind Kamala. It's gross. I mean, I get it. I'm biased when it affects what I write about and how I write about it. But the fact that any of these outfits get away with pretending they're objective is ridiculous. It's a sham.
They are the pretense of objectivity is lost. They've burned up their credibility, and maybe that's one of the byproducts of this year, as crazy as it's been, that all these guys are going to literally just be extended arms of the campaign of Kamala Harris. And maybe it's not just a presidency. It's not just a presidency. It's not just a Congress. It's a massive correction that has to take place, and eventually it will, one way or the other. It's just that, can we do it in this election?
Right.
Because then I know a lot of these people will go back to their old ways after losing, but some will actually say, that didn't work, actually, and there's a lot of people who feel lied to because of how bad Biden was, which we all knew.
Yeah.
They feel lied to, but then what's the price of being lied to? Are there enough Americans that can be reminded to hate President Trump enough to vote against their own best interest on nearly every issue that is of consequence?
Right. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. I think it's issues versus Trump negatives, and that's what it comes down to, and that's what the campaign will be about. I did see, I think, Trump's first ad going after Harris on the border, and it was good. It was good. That is exactly what he should be doing right now, is going at her mercilessly on policy
and not waiting.
And not waiting. And I think it was a little. I think they waited too long. I don't know if they had those ads in the can or not. They probably would have been prudent to have those ads in the can because of what had happened in the month before Kamala became the presumed nominee. But yeah,
the presumptive nominee for like a little bit less than a week.
I know. It seems like, again, a lifetime ago.
Yeah. And I think that they are capable of producing ads pretty quickly when you have the financial resources to do it.
Yep.
Kamala's raised $200 million in like a week,
Yep.
so we are. It's all getting really, really real. It's a titanic battle, and we're all going to have a front row seat as it unfolds. But we also have to remind people they can't just sit on their hands. No one else is going to save the country for you if you don't take a personal role in it somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, there's a ton of work to be done just in Oregon, and it it doesn't take a lot. It just takes trying and letting people know the way you feel about it, and doing so in a smart way that doesn't offend them, hopefully, to the degree that's possible.
Yeah,
And that's how change happens.
it does. 80% of politics is just showing up and doing
Yep.
something. Yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining me here tonight. I really appreciate it. And as usual, thank you for what you do in the commentary, the analysis, the investigation, and the action you take. I'm really proud and pleased to be able to bring this to all the folks that follow the captive audience, and to all the folks that want to know more about how to follow you. They need to go to OregonRoundup.substack.com, and they can check out your articles. They can sign up to follow you, and they can also get information about your podcast there and listen in on that and subscribe as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for watching and following. Share this with everyone you can. There's so many people, even folks that would not be surprised at what we're saying, who don't know this stuff, and they need to know it. So share it far and wide, and we'll be back with another episode of the Captive Audience